Oh, gang. What's up? It's Trollbot.exe's guest again. This time, I shall call myself Manto, Japanese for cloak. 俺が日本語上手を話せる. But enough of that. Well, let's continue our story. I saved the world. 2. People seemed at ease suddenly, as if a weight had been lifted. Someone had been chosen. No one else need worry any longer. And I was their hero. The one who protected them from the old man's fate. And then the second call came, and it was like the first time all over again. Everyone held their breath as I made my way to the package's address. When I knocked on the door, this time, there was an audible yelp from the inside, as a woman cried out in surprise and terror, likely. And then the door opened to a man in his 30s like me, with a young boy next to him. The sound of his wife crying behind him in the living room echoed into the entryway. He looked at me, up and down, as if to ask what I was doing there. But then he said, Who are you here for? And I thought for a moment. Nothing I received ever made it clear that I was supposed to be picking up one person or another, just the address. I looked at him as I came to that realization, and he came to it with me. He grabbed a suitcase next to the doorway and called his wife over, tousling his son's hair with a smile on his face. Come along, my love. We have a trip to go on. Did you prepare your bag like we talked about? He said to his wife from over his shoulder. I heard her choke, but then come around the corner, putting her hair behind her ears as she openly wept. Holding the hand of their son, who looked near catatonic. He had no clue what was happening, or perhaps knew exactly what was coming, but wasn't able in his youth to process it. We walked together to the quiet room, with no interruptions, like before. We scanned our IDs, and the doors opened, and inside, where I expected to see some bones, or some rotten, bloated carcass with some foul creature lurched over it, there was nothing. The same emptiness as before, just an empty room. The family looked at each other confused and possibly relieved, and then slowly, with the husband leading the way, nearly dragging his wife in with him, stepped into the room and began to hold her in her arms, along with his son as he stared out at me. And again, I closed the door and remembered the look on his face as the door shut, and all was quiet once more. This was the procedure for a long time. We would go a few months of quiet, peaceful rumination, counting our blessings and appreciating the time we had with our families. I began to feel a sense of real purpose in my duty as a delivery man. I was helping people live fulfilled lives, making them safe from the dangers of those that are hiding in the shadows, waiting to be consolidated. And he was there to get the job done and provide that sense of security to his family and the people of his town. He was its protector, and it was his to protect. And soon, the man began to receive more calls. He would always respond in the dead of night or at the crack of dawn. And soon, he began to deliver his packages to the quiet rooms twice a day, every day for weeks. And soon he began to notice the way the town was flourishing. The remaining people now left behind, small in number, though they were, led extravagant and lavish lives. He himself had enough food in his fridge to have a barbecue every day for the next month. Homes began to become larger, taking up the empty space where their neighbors had once been. A source of stable income became a pastime instead of a necessity. Most people having enough in their savings to live like this for the rest of their days. And each day after it began to slow down significantly, everyone else, much like Nick, began to hope that the following day would see someone else leaving. He could see it in their eyes every day he did his patrols. They would watch him and silently urge him to get rid of someone, anyone, to just go and knock on someone's door and get rid of them, consolidate them so that those left could have more. He saw it. He knew it. But Nick was a man of principle. He was not a vigilante, handing out justice wherever he saw fit. He was a man of law and order. He would await his orders. And soon, as he knew it would, they began to come in. And neighbors dwindled down slowly to 10, and in one evening to 7, and a month later down to 3. Until one day, almost without the hero realizing, he and his neighbor were the only ones left. And he smiled and waited, knowing one day the order would come, that he need not rush. But then one season came, and so did the other, and the order never came. And the hero waited, but still, no call came, no order was given. And each day, his neighbor began to look at him in hatred. The hero began to fear for his life, for the safety of his property, and his family. He would watch his neighbor each night, making it known that he was in his sights, that he would not be caught unaware. But after the fourth night of not sleeping, the hero realized he needed to do something. Something had to give. He made the call. He walked to his neighbor's home. He knocked on the door, and he looked him in the eye and said it was time to be delivered. The neighbor looked at the hero. His eyes were filled with anger, steaming with tears. His face turned down into a hideous grimace. The hero hated him, so he demanded that he go with him to be delivered, and the neighbor complied with the orders given to him. They walked together, the neighbor seizing in the hero's shadow, until they arrived at the quiet room, where the hero, once again, opened the doors for what would be his final delivery. The neighbor looked at the hero, looked behind himself, back at the city, and said, "Is this right?" The hero said nothing. He knew the neighbor already knew the answer. When he didn't respond, the neighbor stepped inside, and the hero closed his doors. It was quiet, and every day the hero would wake and do his patrols, his family, distant and fearful. And despite knowing there was no one else to deliver, the hero always waited for another call to come, waited for them to send him somewhere far away in some other part of the world where others needed delivering. He knew one day the call would come as it always had before, and right he was, but only partially. But while he did get the call, the address of his family that he was to have delivered was that of his own. He slowly made his way down the stairs, looked to his wife in the eye. He had forgotten her name, but she cried now. Cried as she realized that he was in his uniform, his bolas in hand, and his children sat at the table crying as well. He hadn't realized how grown they'd become, or for that matter, remembered that there were in fact two of them. His wife began to weep and beg. She fell to her knees and thrashed her fists against the floor as she asked the hero for what she believed was mercy. But the only mercy the hero believed now was a mercy granted by those who were ordered to be consolidated, so the rest of the world could go on living peacefully. And this was the final test. A test to show that he was worthy of putting the world before his own happiness, to prove what he always knew, that he was a hero. And he used this fact to give him strength as he bound his family together using his bolas, and dragged them out to the quiet room, where he would complete his duty. Weeping now, the hero pulled his family as they thrashed and cried out against the restraints that bound their arms and legs together into the lightless chamber. They called out to him, called him a name he did not remember, but he had to push them out. He knew what he was doing was right, no matter how much it hurt. and with what was left of his strength, he pushed, and with a solid effort, sealed the doors in front of him, and screamed out in agony as he lost everything he loved. He wept for a long time, until finally he began to come to terms with his sacrifice. He stood up and began to walk away from the quiet room to await his next orders, when suddenly there was a thrum beneath his feet, and he turned to look behind him, and what he saw confused and rattled him. Behind the quiet door, the ground had split open, and began to reveal a strange, obsidian-like material, protruding up from broken earth. The shape of it was strangely uniform, and it was accompanied by a loud whining sound as the ground beneath my feet began to rumble even more violently. And then slowly at first, but then rapidly, the quiet room began to rise. I watched in awe as the structure began to reveal itself, hidden deep beneath the earth and rise high above my head height, and before revealing clear glass inside, and inside I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In a brightly lit white room, I could see my family. They were looking at me with hatred in their eyes, just like the people I have delivered. And they were staying in a large living space with ferdance and lush greenery surrounding every corner, like a localized terrarium. But then it wasn't just them, it was others too. People I had delivered, I had sent to be consolidated, and they all looked at me with hatred. And slowly, I began to realize the structure was continuing to rise. Now out of the ground and into the air, I looked in terror, as I began to understand that I was being left behind, and I saw him, the old man, his steely gray eyes looking back at me, and I flew into a rage. I screamed as the ship began to lift into the air, taking the remaining survivors of this planet to some other distant, inhabitable planet that could support them. I did not scream as I watched in silence, as other ships began to lift into the skylines, from towns and cities hundreds of miles away from me, as what remained of humanity fled the dying world that they had abandoned me in. And then I sat in silence. No more lights were visible from my meager view of the skyline. And I sat still, very still. I'm the hero. I saved the world. And indeed a hero he was. Too bad he did realize the price it would take. Trollbot.exe, back to you. Farewell for now. Okay, Monto, great job there. And next time, we will be back to speed as we're doing the History of Voltron Part 4. Finally. So, get excited everyone. And in the meantime, later, fools.